All right, so today we're going to dive into something pretty stylish, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at Christian Dior's The Little Dictionary of Fashion.
Oh,
Now, when you hear that title, you might think, oh, this is just for people who love vintage fashion. But I think,
hmm
Dior's ideas about elegance and good taste, they're surprisingly relevant, even now.
absolutely.
It's not really about the trends themselves, but more like these
hmm
timeless principles of self-expression,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, it's fascinating how so much of his vision, it's from 1954, by the way,
Oh, wow.
but it still holds up, right? I mean, there's a reason we all know his name. He's synonymous
Right.
with timeless elegance, even today.
It's true. And
Oh,
some of his opinions, they might surprise you a little.
okay.
Like, he really disliked shoulder pads.
Interesting.
Even when they were like a massive trend, he just wasn't having it.
Yeah,
To him, the point was to like celebrate the natural lines of the body,
I see.
not to try to force some, artificial shape.
Yeah, and that really gets at, I think, his whole philosophy, right? It's about understanding your own body and
Yeah.
enhancing it, not trying to kind of conform
Right.
to
Yeah.
some fleeting, like, ideal.
It's like he's saying, know yourself, know your strengths,
Yeah.
and dress accordingly.
Yeah.
He even thought that women should wear more perfume, not less.
Wow, that's bold.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Yeah.
It's a bold statement.
That confidence, though, I think it's like a thread that runs through everything he did.
Mm-hmm.
He really wanted women to feel empowered, not to fade into the background.
Yeah.
And perfume, for him, I think it was like an extension of that personality.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so let's unpack some of his core beliefs then.
Okay.
He really emphasizes these things again and again.
Hmm.
Simplicity, grooming, and good taste. Those are the cornerstones of elegance for him.
Hmm.
It's not about following trends without thinking.
Right.
It's about making choices that truly reflect who you are.
This idea of intentionality is just so important. Yeah.
And it applies beyond fashion too, right?
Right.
Whether it's your career, relationships, or your personal style,
Mm-hmm.
being deliberate about the choices that you make,
It makes a difference.
that's what makes all the difference.
Yeah, totally. And you can see it reflected in his specific advice about fashion, too.
Okay, like what?
Let's take color, for example.
Okay.
Dior, he loved the classics, black, navy, gray,
Yeah.
but he wasn't afraid of like a strategic pop of color.
Mm-hmm.
He even uses the example of a red coat
Okay.
to brighten up a winter wardrobe that's full of neutrals.
I love that. It's that unexpected touch
Right.
that takes something from just kind of good to really great.
Yeah.
And it's so classic Dior, right? If you think about his like new look silhouettes,
Mm-hmm.
often very structured, elegant,
Yeah.
but then boom, a sudden burst of color or some
Yeah.
playful detail, just to keep things interesting.
It's true. He really had a knack for that balance. All right, let's move on to accessories.
Okay. Dior believed that accessories were so important for
Mhm.
expressing your personality and for elevating even a simple outfit.
Yeah.
And, get this, he said handbags are just as important as the clothes themselves.
Interesting.
Think about that next time you're choosing a handbag.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
A handbag isn't just something practical.
Right.
It's an extension of your style. It's a statement piece.
Right.
And he always put quality above quantity,
Yeah.
especially when it came to accessories.
Okay. And this emphasis on quality,
Hmm.
it ties into one of the most fascinating parts of his philosophy, I think.
Oh, what's that?
This idea of fashion as camouflage.
Yeah.
He actually thought you could use fashion to play up your best features, and downplay any imperfections.
Yeah.
It's almost like a subtle art form.
This is where you really see his understanding of the female form.
Uh-huh.
He wasn't about imposing like one single ideal of beauty.
Oh, right.
He was giving women the tools to work with their own unique features,
Yeah. Yeah.
to feel confident in their own skin.
I mean, that's a really empowering idea, isn't it?
It is.
Like you can use fashion to shape your own narrative, to show the world your best self.
It's about making these conscious choices, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the power of like silhouettes, proportions,
Mhm.
and how they can work for you. It's subtle self-expression.
Yeah, yeah.
It goes way beyond just following trends.
Okay, now get ready for this.
Right.
This little detail just fascinated me.
Okay.
Dior was obsessed with bows.
Bows.
Bows. Big ones, small ones, on hats, on dresses, you name it.
Wow.
He saw them as this feminine touch that could, add a touch of playfulness
Yeah.
to any look.
I wonder if his love for bows was also like a reaction against
Pretty interesting.
the austerity of the post-war era.
That's a good point.
You know, like maybe he saw them as, I don't know, symbols of hope and femininity, a way to bring joy and lightness back into fashion.
That's such an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
It adds like a whole new layer to his design choices.
Yeah,
that's true. And speaking of details, he was really into collars and cuffs too.
Okay.
He goes on and on about fit and proportion and how these elements frame your face, your hands.
It's like he was saying every detail matters.
Yeah.
And that attention to detail extended to his thoughts on jewelry too.
How so?
He preferred quality over quantity, always.
Okay.
And he even gave tips on how to wear costume jewelry well,
Oh, cool.
elevating it so it's not just fake jewelry.
He understood that true elegance wasn't about like flashing the most expensive jewels.
Right.
It was about choosing pieces that went with your style.
Right.
And made your whole look better.
So true. Okay, so we can't forget about fabrics. They were really central to Dior's vision.
Yeah.
And he was especially passionate about two: wool and silk.
What did he like about them?
He called wool the material of today because it's so versatile, so moldable. It's almost like he saw it the way a sculptor sees clay, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. A material that can be shaped into endless forms.
And what about silk?
Oh, silk. He called it the queen of all materials. For its elegance and beauty, of course.
Of course.
You can almost feel his admiration for these fabrics just leaping off the page.
Yeah, it's true. It feels like he saw them as these partners in his creative process, right?
Exactly.
Each one with these unique qualities that can be used to make something really beautiful.
And even though he loved these classic fabrics, Dior was known for being innovative too. He wasn't afraid to experiment, to try new materials and techniques.
Yeah.
Always kind of pushing the boundaries of what was possible in fashion.
I like that.
Okay, are you ready for a little dose of Dior's fashion don'ts?
Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
He had some pretty strong opinions on what he considered nonsense in fashion.
Okay.
And some of them were pretty funny.
All right.
For example, he could not stand seeing brogues worn with a cocktail dress.
I have to admit, I'm kind of curious about the thinking there. Was it the, like, formality clash?
Maybe?
Or did he think it messed up the feminine silhouette he worked so hard to create?
Right.
It's interesting to think about, like, the why behind these rules.
Yep.
You know, even if they seem arbitrary.
It definitely makes you think about those subtle messages we send with the clothes we choose.
Totally.
And speaking of clashing styles, Dior also thought wearing a raincoat over an evening gown was completely absurd.
Well, I mean, maybe he thought it took away from the elegance of the gown, or maybe it was just, like, impractical.
Right.
Either way, it's a good reminder that context matters in fashion.
Right.
What works for one situation might look totally out of place.
Yes.
In a different situation.
And this whole section on nonsense, it might seem a bit outdated,
Yeah.
but I actually think it's pretty relevant today.
Oh, how so?
It makes us question some of the trends we see, you know,
Yeah.
and ask, do they really make our style better?
Right.
Or do they just create this sense of chaos?
It's a good reminder that we don't have to just follow every trend that Right. comes along. We
Yeah.
can choose, we can be intentional, and focus on making a look that feels real to us, even if it means breaking a few fashion rules along the way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like he's giving us permission to, you know, be discerning,
Yeah.
to figure out our own sense of style instead of just letting those trends boss us around.
Right, and that self-assurance, I think that's really at the heart of everything he talks about.
Yeah.
He wanted women to, like, move through the world with grace and confidence. And I think that starts with feeling good in what you're wearing.
Speaking of moving with grace, Dior had some thoughts on that too.
Really?
He thought the way you walk can make or break an outfit. Like even the simplest look can be elevated by a graceful, confident stride.
It's almost like they're two sides of the same coin, right? Fashion and movement.
Yeah.
The way a garment flows when you walk, how it frames your body.
Yeah.
It all adds to the impression you make.
He really did have like a holistic view of style, didn't he?
He did.
It wasn't just about the clothes themselves.
Yeah.
It was about how you wear them, how you carry yourself.
And that confidence to just be yourself,
Yeah.
it really comes through in another one of his key points.
What's that?
He said, "No elegant woman follows fashion slavishly." He really believed that true elegance comes from individuality.
Yeah.
From finding your own style and expressing it confidently.
It's such a powerful message, especially
Yeah.
now
I know.
when we're like bombarded with all these trends and images telling us how we're supposed to look.
Yeah.
It's about taking back that power, saying, this is me, this is how I choose to express myself.
Exactly. And that's where I think his insights on camouflage become even more fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about hiding flaws. It's about using fashion strategically to highlight what you love about yourself and project the image you want to show the world.
It's like a subtle form of like self-sculpting almost.
Yeah.
Dior gives specific examples, like using padding to create the illusion of wider shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
Or wearing vertical stripes to look slimmer.
He understood that everybody's different, and he wanted women to have the knowledge to make choices that flatter their own unique shape and style.
It wasn't about fitting into a mold, right?
No.
It was about celebrating that individuality.
Exactly. And that attention to detail, it didn't stop at silhouettes and proportions.
Okay.
He also thought it was important to choose the right fabrics.
Yeah.
To get the effect you want.
Dior believed that velvet should only be worn in winter.
Oh, really?
No velvet after March.
I can see why he'd say that.
Yeah.
Velvet has that richness, that heaviness that feels right for colder weather.
Right.
It wouldn't have the same effect in spring or summer.
He really understood how fabrics worked with the seasons, didn't he?
He did.
And how to choose materials that felt right for the time and place.
And while some of his nonsense might seem outdated now, I think it's valuable to think about the reasons behind those rules. It helps us to really examine our own fashion choices and develop our own sense of what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. It's about taking inspiration from the past,
but
ultimately creating a style that feels authentic to ourselves.
Yeah, it's like having this conversation with a stylish friend from another time, getting their perspective on fashion and how it reflects like the world they lived in.
And speaking of conversations, I'm kind of curious to hear more of these nonsense pronouncements from Dior.
Okay.
He clearly had strong opinions.
Yeah, he did.
Even if some of those rules, I don't know, they seem a bit old-fashioned now.
Hey, okay, get ready for this one.
Right.
He thought pairing high heels with slacks was absurd.
Really?
Completely absurd.
That's surprising. I mean, that's such a common combination now.
I know.
What do you think was behind that? I think for slacks, he was picturing a more like tailored look.
Okay.
Something that emphasized those clean lines.
Yeah.
Effortless chic.
Yeah.
And I think in his mind, high heels just disrupted that.
Interesting.
Makes you wonder what he'd think of how women's fashion has evolved.
Yeah.
Especially in the workplace where trousers are so common now.
It would be fascinating to get his take.
Right. Okay, ready for another one.
Hit me.
Dior thought it was nonsense to wear a big straw hat with a raincoat.
Okay, that one makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
Purely from a practical standpoint. A big straw hat, not exactly the best choice in the rain.
He definitely had a sense of practicality mixed in with his style pronouncements. But I also think it speaks to his belief in like harmony and balance. Like different elements of an outfit should work together.
Yeah.
Not clash, not create a feeling of disarray.
It's like he was advocating for a more thoughtful approach to getting dressed. Thinking about the context, the occasion, the overall message you're sending.
And at the end of the day, I think that's really what his little dictionary of fashion is all about.
Yeah.
It's about encouraging us to be more mindful, more intentional, and more confident in our own style choices.
He's giving us the tools to be our own fashion editors.
I like
To
that.
create a wardrobe that reflects who we are.
Yeah.
And helps us move through the world with, you know, grace and style.
And he reminds us that fashion can be a source of joy.
Oh, absolutely.
Creativity, self-expression.
It's not about following rules blindly. It's about figuring out what works for you.
Yeah.
And owning it.
Exactly. It's about embracing that zest he talks about at the end of the book.
That zest for designing.
Yeah.
For making, and for wearing your clothes.
Yeah.
With confidence, with individuality.
He wanted women to feel that spark.
Yeah.
That sense of empowerment.
It makes a difference.
That comes from choosing clothes that make you feel your best.
And that feeling, that confidence.
It shows, you know.
It does.
It makes you even more stylish and captivating.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Dior's little dictionary of fashion, We hope you've picked up some timeless wisdom, some playful insights, and maybe even a little inspiration to approach your own style with, a little more of that zest.
Remember, it's not about copying trends.
Right.
It's about being self-aware, experimenting, and ultimately finding what makes you feel confident and beautiful.
And hey, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll even find yourself channeling a little bit of Dior's playfulness next time you get dressed.
After all, fashion should be fun.
Don't forget to check out the show notes for a link to the book.
Yes.
If you want to dive even deeper into Dior's world of fashion wisdom, until next time, stay stylish.